The ceasefire in Syria is in danger of collapse after a US-led airstrike mistakenly killed dozens of Syrian soldiers. It was meant for Islamic State. Australian forces were involved in the attack, and the Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, has expressed regret for the loss of life. Australia's Defence Minister has shut down questions about what exactly Australia's role was. That's not good enough, according to independent MP Andrew Wilkie, a former intelligence analyst and military officer. He joined me from Hobart. Andrew Wilkie, thanks for joining us.
Good evening, Lee.
How likely do you think it is that the public will ever get answers to questions like exactly what role did Australian forces play in this mission? How did we come to be involved in this thing that's gone wrong?
Well, I worry that we'll never get a straight answer, and I worry that one of the reasons for that is that we seem to be prepared to leave it to the United States to investigate this terribly tragic incident. I would have thought that it would be in our very best interest and in the public interest for us to conduct our own inquiry. I mean, the death of apparently some 62 Syrian soldiers, maybe 100 injured. I mean, this is an enormous foul-up, a very tragic foul-up. We need to find out what went wrong, whether there was any incompetence, or I suspect more likely, was it just the result of so many aeroplanes, so many soldiers from so many countries in such a small area, perhaps the size of Victoria.
Given that the United States coordinates the planning and the intelligence and the strategy, why is it not appropriate for the United States to do the investigation?
Oh, well, they should, of course, do their own investigation. But we are a sovereign state and we should be participating in the action on our terms, and we should want to find out ourselves what exactly went on. Given that this is we're part of a US-led coalition, and there could be mistakes or even misconduct on the part of the leadership of that coalition, then it makes sense that to find out ourselves what went on and not rely on people who could be conflicted.
And what sort of inquiry do you think would be most likely to get to the heart of that? A military inquiry, an independent inquiry, a parliamentary inquiry?
Oh, look, I think in the first instance we could trust our military to look into this. I mean, we have as good a defence force as any in the world, and I have complete confidence in them. And that's why I say that I don't think this is incompetence in any way from Australia's part. It seems from what little we know that the problems were the result of other people or other nations. Although I make the point again, we don't really know what went on. All we know is that a lot of soldiers were killed who are people that we should not have been targeting.
You mentioned the number of aircraft that are in that airspace in the Middle East. Given the extraordinary technology that's available these days and what that means for intelligence, how is an error like this actually possible?
Oh, Lee, an error like this is, in fact, it's not only possible, it's probable. I mean, let's look at this. We have got an area perhaps the size of Victoria, as I say. You've got the Syrian military, you've got the Russian military, you've got the US-led coalition, which includes a number of countries, obviously the United States and Australia. You've got Turkish forces on the border, you've got the Iraqi military in the theatre, you've got Islamic State, you've got, who knows what else. This is incredibly complex situation. You've got a ceasefire that's supposed to be in place between the Assad regime and its opponents, while at the same time we're waging war against Islamic State in and amongst them. I mean, this is exactly the sort of situation where accidents will happen, despite the very best soldiers, the very best systems. It's probably another very good reason why we shouldn't even be there. We shouldn't be involved. Although we helped create many of these problems in the Middle East, I don't see any good coming for our national interest by remaining there.
The counter-argument to that is that Islamic State is a global threat and therefore Australia should play its part in trying to contain or eradicate that threat.
Well, the greater threat to Australia by far are now homegrown would-be terrorists, and these are people that I make no excuse for. I mean, the sort of people who want to and do try to commit terrorist offences in Australia, there is no forgiving them, there is no excusing them, and I don't excuse them. But when we look at how we should be responding to this situation, sure, within Australia we should have the very best law enforcement, the very best intelligence processes and people in place to deal with these people that are among us now. And we should also be looking at what motivates these people, and the fact is that it is Western meddling in the Middle East, it's our meddling in the Middle East, our continuing involvement in Syria and Iraq which is mobilising these people.
Just on another matter that relates to some of the points you've just raised, there are reports that the Prime Minister's office is finalising a review into Australia's intelligence services. What sort of things would you like that review to take a look at?
Look, I saw those reports and I think that's good. I think we should, from time to time, review both the agencies internally, but also the relationship between the agencies and the relationship between those agencies and foreign agencies. There is no doubt that things have become very complex now with these transnational threats like terrorism. I think there is great weight or great merit in the concern in the community that since 9/11, the law reform has gone too far, and now the community has had too many of its own rights eroded as we try and make the nation safer.
Maybe the community would have the opposite response, though, given that since 9/11 we have seen more examples of homegrown terrorism in Australia.
Oh, look, there is no doubt we have a homegrown terrorist threat. The challenge for governments is to deal with that threat while at the same time preserving the fundamental rights of our community. It is a challenge. It's very, very easy for people, including myself, to sort of, sit back and throw stones and be critical. But I did 20 years in the military. I did a few years in the intelligence community. I understand the challenge. I think, though, we're going a bit too far. The challenge for government is not to give the security services everything they want and demand and ask for, just to give them just enough to do their job and to let the community have its rights preserved.
Andrew Wilkie, thank you very much.
Thanks, Lee.